Hello, and welcome to the Church Revitalization podcast, brought to you by the Malphurs Group team, where each week we tackle important, actionable topics to help churches thrive. And now, here's your hosts, Scott Ball and AJ Matthew.
AJ Matthew, welcome to the Church Revitalization podcast live. My name is Scott Ball. You are also looking at AJ Matthew.
Scott.
Yeah,
hello,
man.
World.
And look, I'm sporting my Dallas Cowboys. If you're listening to the podcast, you can't see me. But I am wearing my Dallas Cowboys Tony Romo jersey, remembering the good old days that are just like the current days, actually, where we win football games, but not any sort of titles. But celebrating the recent NFL draft. Hey, if you watch the draft, I know this is very important stuff here. Let us know in the comments. Let us know where you're watching from. Let us know that you're here. Oh, it's a great day to be alive, right?
It definitely is. It is a great day to be alive.
Okay, AJ, your face did not say it. Again, if you're listening, you could not see AJ's face just now, but his face did not say it's a great day to be alive.
That was an insincere, well, I don't know. I feel like it's a great day. I'll try. Do I look happy now?
Yeah, there you go. Put that smiling face on. Again, welcome to the Church Revitalization podcast. We're doing this thing live, and really, we should just call this the COVID-19 Church Podcast because it's dominating the headlines. It's dominating our topics, as it should, because it's the thing that's happening right now, and it demands all of our attention. And today we've got something very, very practical that we want to cover, and that's a roadmap to reopening. We want to know, how can we reopen in phases? Obviously there are sort of a phased approach to reopening the economy that those guidelines have come out from the White House over the last couple of weeks, and states are starting to adapt those guidelines for their own purposes, and so the implications are going to be different state by state. But we wanted to take those guidelines, AJ, as they are from the White House, and then translate the implications of those things for churches, because what I'm hearing on the internet is that a lot of churches feel like they've got to wait till phase 3 before they can do anything. And we want you to know that that's not true. There are things you can start doing even in phase 1. And we want to walk through, what does that mean? What does phase 1 look like for churches? Phase 2 look like for churches? Phase 3? A couple of disclaimers I feel like we should have to start off. One is, everything that we're saying here is just, our interpretation and our recommendations on things at a very general sense. You should always listen to your local and state authorities. And then 2, every church needs to make decisions for itself. If you've got a large population of folks in your church who are, especially vulnerable or have health conditions, the implications might be slightly different for you. And so please know that these are our recommendations and our interpretation of these things, and you're ultimately responsible for making the decision for yourself and what's best for your church. Any other thoughts on that before we dive into this, AJ?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe the word suggestion would be better than recommendation even. Sure. But really, what we want to do is kind of what we do with almost any topic, and that's just maybe bring another point of view so that you can think through your specific case. And of course, different states have different levels of illness happening and different, death rates. And it's horrible that we even have to say that. And then, of course, churches are different also. So, I mean, your church in Florida that's 80%, age 70 and over is going to have a very different thing happening than the rural church in Montana that is, a couple of dozen millennials. So, and we know that, but it's hard for us to necessarily put something out there that works for everybody. And you don't expect that from us anyway. I know that you don't. Right. But I think we do have some great things just to think through. And but by the way, since we're talking Florida and Montana, I haven't seen anybody from Montana chime in yet, but Florida's on here. Who else? Iowa, Georgia, Kansas, Minnesota. So yeah, definitely let us know in the comments where you're from. We love seeing that. And we sure are happy that you guys are all on. So let's go, Scott.
All right. Yeah. So, George, by the way, commented and said the Cowboys had a great draft. I could not agree more. I feel like we got steals in every single round, and I can't wait to see what happens. Okay. Enough about football. Um, so here's how we're gonna do this. Basically, we want to go Cowboys. Thanks, Josh. Um, we we so distracted right now. We're going to go first. We want to go by phases. We're going to do phase one, phase two, phase three. First, I want to outline what's happening, like what the White House recommendations are, the guidelines are from the White House for each phase, and then what the implications are for churches at each phase. So that's kind of the outline of where we're going. I've got some slides up here for you, hopefully. Yeah, all right, good. So these appear to be showing up. So let's just start with
Scott, can they download the roadmap PDF right now and follow along?
You know what? They can. I'm going to add this in the comments. If you go to malfirsgroup.com/roadmap, and I'm writing that in the comments right now. You should be able to see that. If you go to malfirsgroup.com/roadmap, you'll get that. You can download that. Lord knows, hopefully the email comes quickly. Sometimes it doesn't come super quickly, but I think we've got it working so that it comes quickly. But malfirsgroup.com/roadmap. But I'm going to put these, what's the text basically of what's in the PDF right up here in the slides for you if you don't want to do that right now. All right, so let's start with phase one, White House guidelines. These are going to be familiar to you. But vulnerable individuals should continue to shelter in place as they have been so far. You want to maximize physical distance when you are in public. That's for everybody. Avoid social settings of more than 10 people and minimize non-essential travel. Essentially, the difference between what we're in right now and phase one is that there's not a stay-at-home order. So you can get out, you can do things, but you're still supposed to maximize your physical distance and really try to avoid getting in big groups. We still want to encourage teleworking in phase one. You can return to work in phases. Close common areas such as kitchens or break rooms like in the church, and you want to make accommodations for vulnerable employees. So these are directly from the White House. I've paraphrased them, but these are essentially the guidelines from the White House for phase one. So let's talk about the implications for churches then. What can you do in phase one when you're a church? Because obviously going back to regular worship services isn't in the cards for phase one. So what can happen? First, you want to continue to ask vulnerable church members to remain home. This is going to be a theme throughout phase one and phase two, just to cheat ahead a little bit. But I think it's important that you continue to reiterate the importance of staying home. The data at this point has become really clear. I think that if you are 65 plus, especially if you have any sort of comorbidities or any other sort of underlying health issues, this thing is really dangerous for you. I think conversely, we've learned that if you're younger and healthy, it's not dangerous to you at all. I mean, there's certainly a risk, but the risks are very low. People need to understand, if they are in a vulnerable category, that the risks for them are actually really severe. So you want to continue to ask those vulnerable church members to remain at home. But we think, we've put here in the PDF, we think you should enhance. Phase one is a chance for you to enhance outreach and assistance to vulnerable members. Since some of your smaller teams can gather to coordinate, right? Up to now, all of your coordination has had to be remote and through Zoom and FaceTime and things like that. But now you can get small teams together to coordinate some outreach things for vulnerable folks. And so you should leverage that opportunity to do more than you maybe have been able to do right now. Thoughts on that, AJ?
Yeah, well, that's a big deal right there, So being able to have any kind of small teams get back together, maybe take care of things that they weren't able to do remotely. And this is also kind of a key one also, especially from our perspective, because we actually have churches waiting to begin some strategic planning work that we had, set to start even before this happened. So once you're actually in this phase, and you can have small groups of 10 or less meeting, then you can begin looking at things, outside the scope of present day COVID-19. And we've had a lot of conversations with a lot of you over the last couple of weeks saying, when can we get started on these things? And still church is trying to decide when they want to start looking more to the future. And we're going to talk more about that also tomorrow on the webinar. So, but that's a key point here in phase 1 and especially into phase 2. Right. Is that we don't have to be stuck in our little globe anymore. We can begin to expand our minds and our future thoughts and planning for the church again. So love that.
Yeah, on that same note, so that's you read my mind there, AJ. That's the next point we wanted to make, that church staff should continue to work from home whenever possible, but staff and leadership teams, team meetings can resume in person with enhanced distance. So, for example, I was just talking yesterday with one of the churches that we're working with in Ohio. Looks like their stay-at-home orders, I don't know, I think we're supposed to get something from, if you're listening to this later, then live, you're going to go, don't you already know? But as we're going live with this, the orders from Governor DeWine have not come out yet, but they're expected sometime later today, I think. But probably their stay-at-home order is going to lift, and so that a church that I'm working with in Ohio right now, we're planning on meeting in May, sort of towards the middle of the month, as things have had time to kind of slightly normalize a little bit, and their group is very small for us to meet with. So staff and leadership teams can get together to do some planning. I would encourage you, what we're going to do with this church is we're going to meet in a larger room than we normally do, or actually the same room, but we're going to create more space in it, space people out. There are a couple folks on their team who are older who probably shouldn't come live. We're going to Zoom them into that meeting. And so you need to keep that in mind. If you've got staff people or leadership team members or elders or deacons who are in a vulnerable category, you need to make accommodations for them and let them feel every much as part of the decision-making process and have them attend the in-person meetings via Zoom or other conferencing apps. Bring them in. But you can do more when you're doing it live and together in person.
Yep.
We've learned that, right? We've been doing this. Amen from anybody if you feel this way. But I know that Zoom and teleconferencing is good, but it's like I saw someone else say this. I'm stealing it. I don't remember who it was, but it's kind of like turkey bacon, right? Like, yeah, I'll eat it, and it's okay. But it's not the real thing. And so with a stay-at-home order lifted, you can actually get back in the room with your leadership team and start making some decisions. So that would be good.
Yeah.
But you want to still keep your common areas closed. And then finally, the last recommendation that we have here on phase 1, and again, this is going to totally depend on your church, but consider adding more live components into your Sunday service streams. I know some of you have continued to do live stuff through this whole time, which is good. But some of you have not been doing as many live components just because you don't want to get 10 people in a room at the church on a Sunday. But now going into phase 1, it'd be okay to do that. So you might start looking at adding more live components. AJ and I actually kind of feel differently about this. He feels like, hey, if you could do the whole thing live, you should, because to him it feels different if it's live. Me, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the production value is actually sometimes better if you pre-record. And so I don't really care if it was live or not. But AJ likes it live. And so
I do.
Yeah, so that's okay. Yeah. Like, you can have a different, do what's right for your church and whatever you prefer. It doesn't really matter.
You do you.
You do you.
Come on, anybody with me? Isn't it kind of, if you're at home, but hey, my pastor's actually on stage and he's talking right now. I'm getting it.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, I know he recorded this on Thursday and I'm just turning it on, at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. Come on, who's with me? It's better when it's live.
I'm in my 30s. AJ is in his, I don't want to say how old he is.
Not.
And for me, I'm like, I don't really care. Like, I don't care if it's live or not. So I don't know if it's a generational thing or a personality thing. Let us know in the comments. Like, do you feel like it feels more real if it's live versus if you pre-record? I don't know. But regardless, you have more opportunity.
Multi-generational perspective here at TMG.
That's right. In my opinion, it doesn't make a difference. Regardless, you have the ability to do more live when you're in phase 1, and that is universally true. George says it's live better. You know what, George? Your comments about the Cowboys.
Thank you, George. He's playing both sides now. He's giving you one. He's giving me one.
That's right. Oh, goodness. Okay, so let's move on to phase 2. Because really, phase 1,
2.
Right now in phase 1, there's not a lot different. The key difference we want you to take away with phase 1 is leverage the opportunity to start planning with your team in person. Like, that's not been something you were supposed to do up to now, but it is something you can do right now. So if you are moving into phase 1, plan on getting together with your team in person. Okay, let's talk about phase 2. Things really start to change here, phase 2. Here are the guidelines from the White House on phase 2. Phase 2, vulnerable individuals should continue to shelter in place. You want to maximize distance in public. Avoid social settings of more than 50 people. This is a key shift in phase 2. Non-essential travel resumes with no restriction. This is another beneficial thing here. Teleworking preferred when possible. Keep common areas closed, such as kitchens or break rooms, and continue to make accommodations for vulnerable employees. Again, these are straight from the White House. Again, I've paraphrased, but this is straight up their guidelines for phase 2. So, implications for churches. You want to continue to ask vulnerable church members to remain at home. Again, I'm emphasizing this point because oftentimes it's the most vulnerable people in your church who are the first to want to show up when the doors are open. And they just shouldn't. This disease is very dangerous for people who are older, especially if they have underlying health conditions. And so please, please, please encourage them to stay at home and make it easy for them to stay at home through the kinds of outreach that you do and services that you provide for them. Secondly,
this is kind of a, I don't know, it has a bit of a tough situation to it, because we don't want to just broadcast also, hey, if you're over 65, don't come to church. I mean, it's really going to be worth trying to connect with folks one-on-one as much as possible, really being as compassionate as possible and encouraging them to just not put themselves at risk. I mean, out of love. I mean, you need to speak with them out of love because it make them feel as important as they are. I mean, every member of your church is important. And I'm sure you've got lots of members in this age group that are super, super valuable and important to your church. And it's going to leave you with probably a lot of holes in volunteer positions and things like that. So don't just let this be some blanket statement or send a broadcast email. Hey, if you're over 65, don't come to church. And take the time to really explain the heart and the necessity, for their benefit, because this is going to go on for a while for them as well. I mean, we're going to see this in throughout phase 2 and phase 3. Don't think, Scott, not to look too far ahead, but I think phase 3 says vulnerable people can kind of go back out more, but this is still in some areas months away for them. And I think it's going to become more and more important to really do something targeted for this population of your congregation, to make sure that they still feel connected. So really take the time. Don't just go, phase 1, phase 2, we'll see you later. We'll see you in 2021. Right. Because that's just going to be tough. That's a long time away.
Well, and I mean, to be fair, we don't really know. Like, you might adjust your plan depending on how fast your state happens to be moving through the phases. Optimistically, I think some people feel like we can get to phase 3 by the end of the summer, in which case it seems reasonable to ask folks to hold off till then. If it's looking like phase 3 is not going to come in your state until there's a vaccine, then it's really unreasonable to consider that. Chris asks a good question. Chris, I'm going to go ahead and broadcast your comment. Here, if I can.
I just saw that. That is it. Yeah. So Chris is asking, while you're doing that, Chris is asking about what do you do if you have somebody in that vulnerable population living in your home? So you're not, but you do have somebody there with you. And I think actually, I mean, the White House guidelines do speak to that you've probably almost need to treat yourself almost as if you are in that population yourself, because you just can't go out running around town and expect to come back and just 100% be safe and not pass something on. So definitely, if you have somebody in that population in your home, you have to be extra diligent about cleanliness and what kind of contact you have. And so, obviously we can't tell you what to do with that. Guidelines are going to be that you also limit your exposure to others. So probably, that's going to gather up probably another fairly large group of people in your congregation, in addition to those in that group, those that live with that group. And what you're left with then is probably a significantly smaller portion of your church meeting live,
right.
Which, as we start in these next couple comments here talking about the size of groups that can meet, it's going to reduce your in-person meeting size for sure by just taking out these two population groups.
Yeah, I think, one of the things to consider, if you're able to get access to antibody testing, and you have a vulnerable person in your house, it might be worthwhile, getting that antibody test to know, hey, I've already beat this thing. And so going in and out is not going to be as risky for me as if, I've not been exposed to this virus yet, and I might be, potentially bringing that home. The reality is, it lives on surfaces, it lives in that and the other. And I think you just have to take your own risk into account. How vulnerable is the vulnerable person living in your home? How healthy are they? Do I need to take some extra precautions, or do I need to take an abundance of caution? And I think it's going to vary from person to person. Unfortunately, there's not really a clear-cut answer on that one. All right, let's move on to the church implications for more of the church implications for phase 2. So we've already said ask vulnerable folks to remain home. Church staff can begin to work on campus more, maintaining distance when possible. So, if you've got people in cubicles right up next to each other, probably spread them out a little bit. Also, just continue to work from home as much as that is logical. I still think staff meetings weekly are good. Spread folks out. I do think that there's real value to meeting in person, but if a lot of the work can be done from home, continue to do the work from home. You don't get bonus points by doing it at the church and exposing yourself to germs, right? So if there's work that can be done from home, do it from home. But meetings in particular, I think, are good. You might also at this point go back to doing counseling and things at the church. I would do it in a lobby or someplace like that that's more open. And maybe don't shut a door, and close yourself in with somebody in close proximity. But you might be able to begin some of those kinds of things again. All right. Now, in phase 2, remember the restrictions are 50 gatherings of 50 or more. So is what you can have 50 or fewer, I should say, are allowed in phase 2. And so depending on the size of your church, the implications are different. So we're basically recommending that, if a church has 100 people or fewer on average, typically, then look to go to 2 services, multiple services with each under 50 in attendance. I probably wouldn't reopen children's ministry at that point. It would be kind of a very different looking thing. I'd have seat family units together and have a minimum of 6 feet in all directions between groups. If you live in a place that has really nice weather, consider just doing your whole service outside. Have people bring your own lawn chair. That have family groups sit together and then space out in between and in the open air. We know that that's better and safer anyway. That's another option if you live in a place with good weather. And we are going into the summertime, so that's going to be a lot of you. But when you're seated inside, have family units sit together and then space out in between. And so, if you're under 100 or fewer, small churches actually get the benefit here earlier on in terms of going back to regular worship services. Don't talk about 100 or more yet, AJ. Any thoughts on the churches of 100 or fewer you want to add?
No, I think that's it. You'll probably be looking at every other pew, so that front to back distance is spaced out, and then do something to leave gaps in between pews, or mark off chairs with some kind of markers or something like that. But you're probably going to be seating people. Your ushers are going to be doing more maybe than they have in the past in your church. But actually bringing people in and seating them instead of just giving them a wink and a bulletin when they come in.
Yeah.
So make sure you're staffed up for that. So you probably are going to need more people on site ready to bring people in.
Dean asked a good question, and I might be answering this here in just a second, but Dean wanted to know if phase 2 would be a good time to start having like house churches where maybe people from other families would gather in small groups and homes. I would think that that's probably not a good idea, just because you're in a more confined space with different people. I guess if it were the same people every week, theoretically, it might be somewhat safer. But I think you would actually be safer to do it at the church in a bigger room where people are still sitting with primarily just their family in a grouping and then having space in between. But that's a really good question. Bill also mentioned that it's essential to communicate how the facility is being cleaned and cared for. 100%. We talked about this last week on the podcast, and it's also one of the recommendations that we make in our ready to reopen checklist to create a cleaning regimen for every single space and have that publicly posted and visible for folks to see. So if you don't have that checklist, we'll post that in the comments too, how you can download that. Okay.
Yeah. So Sam had a good comment here too, though. How do you enforce the only 50? Yeah, we should probably talk about that. So, maybe one of the easiest ways would be, I don't know, the early service is A through M and the second service is N through Z last name, or just come up with some other way. If you've got some church software that you're able to divide up, groups, try to figure out where you're going to kind of land half and half. But again, it might also come down to, especially if you've had previously 2 services, where has the population been? Has, your older population been in your first service or your second service where maybe already like, oh, well, we normally had 50, but these folks probably aren't going to be coming to church. So we're only going to have 20 probably show up for the first service anyway. So this is sort of a case by case, but probably if you actually did need to come up with some division, you could certainly do it alphabetically. You probably don't want to make it too complicated. And of course, you're going to have to communicate that well to make sure that people are not going, well, I thought I was supposed to be here. And so, yeah, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one. I do think you could come up with, someone said you could do it by Sunday school class or small group, like these groups are group A and these groups are group B. That would be an option. You'll be able to find a system that works for you. The thing you want to account for, and we mentioned this last week, but you want to, if the group limit is 50, you want to plan for like 35 maybe that would come, and so that you have room for guests. Because a guest is not going to know, oh, I'm not supposed to come at 9 o'clock because my last name starts with an S and I'm supposed to come at 10:30. A guest is just going to show up when they show up. So you want to be sure you leave margin in there for a guest to just show up or for a person to show up that they're not supposed to. So that would be one thing to account for. The other thing that I've seen churches do, which is smart, is to have like an overflow room. So if more than 50 show up, sanctuary capacity is full, maybe in the fellowship hall or something like that, you set up a secondary location and you've got TVs set up with the live stream running down there. It's not optimal, but you're planning on 50 and you've got space for 50. And if more than that show up, have an overflow spot so that you can follow the rules and follow the guidelines. Okay, let's talk about churches that are over. Josh asked a good question about, can we just keep adding services so that we stay under 50? And we've felt like that was not really very practical for churches that are over 100 people. And so here was our recommendation for churches over 100. To get creative in developing in-person, on-campus, I put in quotes here, experiences, likely around small groups where each gathering is limited to 50 or fewer. And then you can and you would probably need to do some sort of an RSVP to ensure compliance. In a much larger church, you're going to want to make sure that you have a really clear RSVP type system so you know how many people are showing up. to each event, and you can limit that capacity. But an idea that I had, it's just one idea, you can get creative and come up with your own, is to take, if you've got, if you're a larger church, you can, and if you have the ability to, like your chairs are movable, move the chairs and create almost like miniature living rooms inside your large sanctuary. Maybe you create 10 of them with each that has 5 seats, or 5 of them that have 10 seats. And you space the chairs out so that they're physically distant, but you almost create these little miniature living rooms inside of it where groups can meet and groups can communicate with each other. I think that could be really fun. What do you think about that idea, AJ?
Yeah. I mean, and I have, I've got a friend of mine, his church does a similar thing. They were doing that a year ago, and that's worked out really well for them, actually, growing groups that way. So, yeah, that can be cool. But because you're talking about groups, right, Scott, not a Sunday morning worship.
That's right. I'm talking about, groups. So you still streaming the Sunday service, but you can start having groups have them meet on campus. And just, they're small. Like if your small group normally has 6 people and they're seating for 10, you might have 4 people who join your group that you don't normally have in your group. And that's maybe another way to continue to grow your groups even during the season. So people are going to be hungry for that in-person experience. And once there is an opportunity to have groups of 50, your church should leverage that, even if you're a large church. Just get creative in a way that you can do it where you can maintain physical distance, keep things safe, but begin to open up some sort of on-campus church experience for people who, the extroverts in your church like me, who are like just dying to see some people. I love my family, but I would love to see some people, other people as well. They're not watching this right now, I'm sure. I love you guys, but also I'm interested in seeing some other folks too. And
Josh is
else?
lamenting now, trying to sing worship songs with a mask on. Apparently, you've tried that, Josh, and it's not working out for you. So here's a free product idea. Any of you can take this and patent it. Send me a royalty if you want to. The battery-powered mask with auto-tune built in could be the best thing that ever happened to the church.
I gotta tell you,
built-in choir.
I was at Walmart the other day getting some groceries and a couple other like toiletry things we needed, and the cashier was talking to me with her mask on. I just gotta tell you, like, I could not understand what she was saying. She was speaking too softly for wearing a mask, and I have to admit, like, I just smiled and nodded. Am I the only one who's done that? Someone's talking to you, they have a mask on, and you cannot understand them, and you don't want to feel rude and keep saying, "What? Huh? Repeat that? Eh?"
I can't hear you with that mask on.
2020 problems. Okay, we got to keep moving. All right. Where's my cursor? Can't find my cursor. There it is.
Where are we at? Phase 3?
No, one more thing on phase 2, very briefly. This is fast. No food or drinks that are not prepackaged. Okay, so you got to start rethinking your whole hospitality strategy. People are going to be nervous about this for the long term. So gone probably, or at least gone for now, are the days of, hey, grab yourself a cup and then use the same coffee urn that everyone is using. You're going to have to come up with some other way for doing refreshments or just not have them. People are not going to be offended right now if you don't have them. It's not like pre-corona where people would be like, man, can't believe you don't have coffee. Now people are going to be like, wow, that looks like a germ factory. So you just want to be aware of how people are going to perceive different things. And come up with a way to, if you're going to have refreshments, do it in a way that people aren't nervous about the refreshments. All right,
and let me just mention also right here, also, this may be the point in which you could return to communion, and because you can get the super nasty prepackaged wafer cup, the little styrofoam wafer on top. Because those could be handed out by, a gloved usher, even when people are entering the sanctuary, so that they've already got their thing and then they can just throw it away when they're done. So that might be the opportunity. Some people, think that's okay. Others don't, but that would be the time probably in which you could return to communion if you wanted to do that. And let's just hit this real quick. Bill was talking about, square footage for 50 people, big auditorium versus a small one. just default back to the 6-foot rule, Bill. And pews or chairs, seat a family together, leave, 6 feet, double arms length left and right, and probably front to back as well. And just what you can fit.
Yeah. Oh, Chris asks a really good question. Social settings of more than 50 people where appropriate distancing may not be practical should be avoided unless precautionary measures are observed. Is exactly how it's defined by the White House guidelines. And yeah, this goes, Chris, back to exactly what we're saying here. Like, if you're going to seat people, you should only seat them with their family unit. And so I would do plan on a family unit sitting together, 6 feet of space on a row, and then the next family unit, and then an empty row between that. So it depends on if you've got fixed seating or pews, you're not going to be able to move them. In which case, just skip, only seat every other row, and then in between family units, 6 feet of space on either side. And I think in a standard, the way that most churches are set up, this should be able to be accomplished. If you do the math on that, you can just kind of hypothetically get in there with your staff and kind of measure it out. What would 50 people look like in here? Can we do this safely? And to your point, if you can't do it safely, then you shouldn't open. That would
reduce that number. Maybe for you, it's going to be 30 people in person.
Sure.
But,
yeah. It's a great question, Chris. Okay. Let's move on. Phase 3. Phase 3, things start to get, the living is good in phase 3. Let's walk through the guidelines from the White House. Vulnerable individuals practice physical distancing when in public and take additional precautions such as mask wearing. So those vulnerable folks can head back to church, but they probably should wear a mask. A lot of folks are not going to want to wear a mask, but it'd be good to have those available. Probably should have those available in phase 2 also. But in phase 3, for sure have them available, especially for your vulnerable folks. All individuals should avoid long exposure to crowds. What that means, this isn't in the notes, by the way. It should be. I just had this thought. This means you don't really want people congregating in the lobby. You don't want that happening. You want to encourage people to continue to move. So what you might say is, if you're going to add this to your announcements, if you're going to kind of chat and talk, please move to outside to do that. Encourage people just kind of keep moving out the lobby. So you might have your volunteers kind of herding people out and say, hey, we're going to not congregate in the lobby so we're not getting germs kind of just suspended in the air in here. If you want to continue to chat, we would love for you to do that, but let's do it outside. You could even encourage that. Start, bring a speaker outside, start playing some music outside. Make it fun to be outside so that people will kind of keep moving out of the lobby into open airspace.
Maybe even roping off, especially if you've got, those stretchy, retractable things, that you see. Yep. Maybe even just have a chute that gets them into your sanctuary, but maybe cordons off, a larger gathering space so that people are just making their way to their seats and, in and out the doors, and just mark off your areas where people maybe normally would hang out.
Get a little pop-up tent, set your guest connection area up outside, so that when a guest, is new, they check into that outside. So just try to do as much outside as you can reasonably. There's been several people, AJ, I don't know if you noticed, who have commented and said it's already 100 degrees here where we live.
Yeah,
outside is miserable. I know. Get some
Sorry,
fans.
Arizona.
Get some fans.
Yeah. But you know what? You mentioned guests a couple times, Scott. Let's just camp on that for 1 second. We are going to be so hyper focused and have tunnel vision on, oh my gosh, people are back in the building. We're going to totally forget about guests. You could still very well have a guest just walk in on any particular Sunday that you reopen. Don't forget about your guests. Like Scott just said, have the pop-up tent outside with a little bit of guest information so you can welcome those folks. Make sure before and after your service, you're still welcoming people and telling them how they can connect with you. Don't forget about your guests because as we've seen in the midst of this, in our remote, meetings, when we come back together, there's still going to be people that are really wanting to connect with your church. Find out who this Jesus is because they know somebody that have an inexplicable hope and they want to have it too. Don't forget about your guests.
Still on the White House guidelines here. No mandated restriction on social gathering size, but again, we should still do common sense stuff, even though there aren't restrictions. Less stringent restrictions on physical distancing within large venues. Again, the White House basically is recommending as much physical distance as is reasonable, although there's not exactly strict rules on that in phase 3. Reopen common areas such as kitchens or break rooms, and enhanced sanitation is still encouraged. Enhanced sanitation is not something we've talked about much today. We talked about it a lot last week, so you can go back and listen to that last week if you want. But enhanced sanitation is going to be one of these things that's with us forever now. People are going to be hyper aware, I think, for forever about how clean things are, and I don't know that that's a bad thing. So let's talk about let's talk about the implications for churches in phase 3. Vulnerable church members should wear a mask at church, and this is a key thing. They should not serve in the children's ministry or in other ministry areas where they are likely to be exposed to COVID-19. We're not saying don't let those folks volunteer anywhere. Like, we want them to be able to use their gifts, but we need to be conscientious of what we're exposing them to. And if they're working in children's ministry and they're 75 years old, they're not going to be able to stop a kid coming up and running up to them or, licking them or something. You know what I mean? Like, there's just no way. Like, you should be conscientious of where you have those folks volunteering and serving. Church staff should work arrangements can go back to basically normal, but I would continue to make exceptions for vulnerable team members if needed. That can't be understated. Like, there are people who are on your staff who probably should continue to work from home for the long term and until they feel comfortable. And that's going to be an individual thing. Like, I just want to speak from somewhat personal experience with some family members I have. You don't know what a person is going through, and they might look like a healthy person or a young person even. But if they've got a condition like an autoimmune disease or something like that, and they're on medication that suppresses their immune system, you don't know all that. And they don't have a responsibility to explain all of their medical conditions to you. So if they say, I'm nervous, I've got some stuff that makes me more vulnerable, you should just trust them and not ask for a deep explanation. They do not owe it to you. Under the law, they don't. So you need to be prepared to have exceptions and work arrangements. You can't fire somebody for that. That's against the law. So even for a church. So you need to, from an HR perspective, know how you're going to handle staff or employees who have medical conditions that make them more vulnerable to this disease. That didn't sound too heavy-handed, did it, AJ? I didn't mean for it to, if it did.
You're flirting with heavy-handed, but it's still good advice. People need to think through these things,
Okay. All church services can resume in person. Churches should still consider more service times and more venue options and creative seating arrangements to minimize spread. Again, the health risk will probably go down faster than people's fears will. So people are still going to be afraid of this virus, even if the health risk is not that great to them. And so you need to be prepared for that and be putting on a face that shows that you care about it and you care about their feelings about it. People's perception is their reality. So if it looks like you're being careless and reckless with how you do seating arrangements or how many people you have in a room or what you're doing with children's ministry or whatever, that's going to be a bad look on you. It might not even be a real health risk, but it's a PR risk for you, and those things do matter. Children's ministry can reopen with enhanced sanitation measures in phase 3. I would not reopen them in phase 2. And finally, develop safe food and drink policies. We kind of already talked about that. And continue to leverage virtual environments for worship in groups, as people may continue to feel anxious about in-person meetings. If you were new to online church and online groups and all of that, as many churches were, these things should not go away, will not go away. You should continue to make this part of your permanent strategy for reaching your community. So thoughts on that, AJ? Anything you want to add? I know I've done a lot of the talking because AJ can't see the slides, so I've kind of taken over the reading of those. AJ,
Yeah,
any
well,
other
no,
thoughts
especially on that last point. Yeah, absolutely. If people talk about a new normal for sure is 100% of churches have some kind of online access to their worship services or group gatherings. So yeah, if you're a smaller church that, just got drug into the 21st century all of a sudden, don't take it out of your head right now that be glad in a few months when we don't have to do all this live streaming anymore. Nope, sorry, live stream. So, regardless of what's going on, for a couple of reasons. I mean, it is still a place that you can reach people. And number two, we don't know what's going to happen next winter here in North America, United States, if we're going to see a big flare up in this again, and we're going to go back to phase 2, phase 1, or something new in the future as well. The next novel coronavirus that hits us. So, you're going to be better prepared next time. But yeah, that's not going away. Yeah, keep using it. So I definitely want to see a couple things, kind of my big takeaways from this. Be really, really intentional about dealing with your quote unquote vulnerable population and showing love and accessibility to those folks and your guests. I think those are kind of the two big things that as we start talking about reopening, really need to stay on the forefront of your mind. How are we going to connect with these two groups or populations of people? And just always remaining aware that they're there, even though you can't see them, and make sure that you're communicating well with them.
A couple things I want to say. Actually, if you have any questions, there's a bit of delay, as you well know, from going live on for worship services between us talking here and your questions coming in. So if you have questions, ask them now. Josh Fortney is getting sassy. He asked if we still need to wash our hands in phase 3. So I'm going to give you a sassy answer. No, Josh, don't wash your hands. Go lick doorknobs and just roll
Everyone
around
except for you, Josh.
Yeah. So ask questions if you have them. I do want to add these things here. Number one, if you liked all the stuff that we just went over, we have in a PDF resource. If you go to malfirstgroup.com, it's in the comments, but malfirstgroup.com/roadmap, that will give you a form you can fill out to download this resource. Last week, we offered a checklist. Tomorrow, we have a training called Reimagining Your 2020 Vision. Reimagining Your 2020 Vision. We are, everything we've done last week and this week is about the next 90 days and how we're going to survive and thrive in that environment. But now is actually the time, especially as we're moving into phase 1 and we can start meeting with our leadership teams. So start dreaming past the next 90 days. You're going to have to start implementing all kinds of new changes, and you might as well, as you're implementing change, begin to think past 90 days and how can we be healthier than we have ever been. And we want to kind of prime the pump for you in that discussion. So if you go to our website, we'll post this link here in the comments as well. But if you go to anything on our website right now and fill out a form for one of these free PDFs, it's going to prompt you and invite you to sign up for the webinar as well. And we would love to have you participate in that. Couple of things on that. Reasons to sign up. Number one, if you sign up for the webinar, you're going to get a resource bundle that we're calling it like the ultimate reopening resource bundle, something like that. It will have that checklist from last week, the roadmap from this week, the video training from the webinar, plus one more free resource that's not available anywhere else will be included in that. So you'll get that sent to you. Also, you'll get a special discount on a new service that we are launching at the Malfirst Group in the webinar tomorrow. So it's an exclusive discount for folks who participate in the webinar training, and it's one you won't want to miss out on. I'm very, very excited about that. And so join us tomorrow for the webinar. It's at 11 a.m. Eastern. If you can't join us live, it's okay. Still register. Watch the replay. You'll still get that resource bundle before anyone else does, and you'll get that exclusive discount for that service that we're launching tomorrow as well. So thank you guys so much for joining in. If you're listening to the recording of this and the webinar has already passed, don't worry. We'll still make sure that you have access to the replay of it and can access all the special stuff that we just announced. Any other closing thoughts, AJ, before we wrap this up?
Thanks for joining us. We are so excited. Our live views have been growing the last couple of weeks. Your comments are great, so keep it coming. We're back here again next Monday with another live podcast, and you can also catch these on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and be able to watch the videos, or here on Facebook. But we're super excited that our audience has been growing. Scott and I get up every day and we work together on what can we do to resource you better, to know you better, and to help your churches be the best disciple makers you can be. That's what we're all about. And so we're super pumped that you're joining in with us, and we're looking forward to doing anything we can to help you in this week or the future. So thank you. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you next week, or maybe tomorrow we'll see you at the webinar.
Bye.